extended panelist. Yes, sir. Yeah. Good morning. The subcommittee will come to order. I want to begin by welcoming everyone to our first subcommittee hearing of the second session of the 113th Congress. Like you, I look forward to a productive session working with my friend and ranking member, Mr. Takano, and I want to thank all of you for being here this morning. Today, the subcommittee will conduct an oversight hearing on the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment, or VR&E program at the Department of Veterans Affairs. This program and its VR&E counselors provide a wide array of rehabilitation and employment services through personalized rehab plans to help the most severely wounded and disabled veterans gain employment or reach maximum independent living. I believe the VR&E program should be the crown jewel of benefits provided to veterans through the Veterans Benefit Administration, since this program has the opportunity to provide veterans great services to transition them to independence and employment. While VR&E counselors continue to provide these vital services to our veterans, I believe, and I'm sure our witnesses on the first panel would agree with me, that more must be done to improve the performance and the effectiveness of this program to ensure that veterans are receiving the services they deserve in a timely manner. A recent GAO report crystallized some of these concerns by highlighting VR&E's problems with accurate performance metrics, workload management issues, and consistency of services throughout the nearly 400 VR&E office locations. As I mentioned in our hearing last fall on VR&E's independent living program, I don't fault the VA central office and field staff for many of these issues. I believe that most of these issues stem from the lack of attention and resources that are provided to the VR&E service by senior VA leaders, which has been VA's practice through many administrations, regardless of party. VA's own testimony states that it saw a 14% increase in applications in fiscal year 2013, and as more and more veterans apply for disability benefits, I'm sure that this number will only grow as budgets remain nearly flat. It is because of this growth in workload and issues raised by the GAO report that I recently introduced two pieces of legislation to help modernize the VR&E program. H.R. 4037, the Improving Veterans Access to Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Act of 2014, would streamline processes at VR&E to help counselors tackle their ever-growing caseloads and ensure that the most severely disabled veterans have timely access to the services that they need for maximum rehabilitation. H.R. 4038, the Veterans Benefit Administration Information Technology Improvement Act of 2014, would require the VA to allocate more funding to update VR&E's corporate IT system called C-Winners, C-WINRS, to improve oversight and tracking of taxpayer resources and the outcome of VR&E participants. My concern about VR&E's IT system continue to be validated when I hear stories about VR&E's offices not having internet connectivity for months at a time, or offices who have to rely on old, outdated fax machines and paper more than computers and technology solutions. I look forward to hearing testimony from our witnesses today, and I hope to learn more about VA's plans to update their systems and implement the recommendations of the GAO's report. We all agree that this program has the ability to greatly improve the lives of veterans, but more work still needs to be done so that we fulfill our promise to every eligible veteran. With that, I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Takano, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we will hear statements and testimony about the effectiveness of the Department of Veterans Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program, otherwise known as VR&E. This program was established to help eligible veterans find gainful employment and to facilitate their successful transition back into their communities. The VR&E program helps return veterans back to the workforce by employing a 5-track model of 1, reemployment, 2, rapid access to employment, 3, self-employment, 4, employment through long-term services, or through long-term service, and 5, independent living for veterans unable to return to work. Service members returning from war are coming home with traumatic brain injuries, post-traumatic stress disorder, and many serious physical injuries. The VR&E program is uniquely positioned to assist our veterans in reintegrating back into their communities and finding meaningful employment. With the major drawdown of our armed forces, we need to understand the impact of the growing wave of returning veterans and to know if VRNE is properly staffed to meet the challenges in 2014 and beyond. I look forward to hearing the new VRNE Director's goals for the program as well as the program's financial needs. I also look forward to hearing the GAO's detailed review of the program and their recommendations on how we can improve the program. Nothing is more important than ensuring that our transitioning service members have access to the services, like VRNE, that they need to succeed in civilian life. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling this hearing today, and I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. I now invite our first panel to the table. With us today is Mr. Daniel Bertoni with the U.S. Government Accountability Office, Ms. Heather Hensley with Vets First, and Mr. Paul Varela with DAV. Your complete written statements will be made part of the hearing record, and each of you will be recognized for 5 minutes for your oral statement. Just as a reminder, you have to push the button in order to be heard over the PA system. And also, the green light means that you're good to go. The yellow light means you have a minute left, and the red light means that you need to wrap up soon. So let's begin with Mr. Bertoni. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, members of the subcommittee, good morning. I'm pleased to discuss our work on the Department of Veterans Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program, which provided education, training, and job placement services to over 120,000 veterans last year. My remarks today are based on our January 2014 report, which examined outcomes for veterans seeking employment through the VRNE program and progress VA has made in addressing critical management issues. In summary, we found that of almost 17,000 veterans who entered the program in fiscal year 2003 and received employment-related services, just under half obtained suitable employment by the end of fiscal year 2012. Another 30% discontinued the program, 20% were still receiving services. While the average time to obtain employment was about 4.5 years, time frames varied. For example, almost half of all veterans completed the program within 3 to 6 years, but nearly 1/4 achieved suitable employment in years 7 through 10. One reason for the lengthy time frames is that a good number of participants discontinued or interrupted their programs along the way, sometimes more than once, before achieving success. Veterans face several common challenges to completing the program and obtaining employment. We found that veterans with mental health conditions and those who worked with multiple staff over time took considerably longer to complete their programs. VA staff and veterans we interviewed also cited family obligations, financial difficulties, and civilian employers' limited understanding of military work experience as barriers to rehabilitation. With regard to VA's progress in addressing critical management issues, we identified several key weaknesses. First, VA has identified limitations with its primary measure of program success, the rehabilitation rate, and is considering an alternative measure. However, its proposed measure for individual staff reflects only the number and not the rate of successful outcomes. It does not reflect the extent to which veterans are discontinued from the program without rehabilitation. Thus, it doesn't provide sufficient context for understanding overall program performance, both regionally or nationally. Going forward, we've recommended that VA consider additional measures to provide a fuller picture of program success. VA also lacks performance measures related to enhancing veterans' long-term employment outcomes and currently considers a job placement to be successful if employment is maintained for only 60 days. Research and practices at other federal employment programs suggest that VA's measure may be insufficient to gauge long-term employment success. The VA may miss an opportunity to hold staff accountable and make program adjustments to achieve such outcomes. With regard to workload management, VA's formula for allocating staff among regional offices may also be contributing to some ongoing workload challenges. We found that the ratio of cases to staff varied widely among offices, with some averaging fewer than 100 cases per staff and others averaging several hundred. Currently, SSA staff allocation formula does not take into account workloads such as educational and vocational counseling, which are substantial in some locations. And regional managers in 5 of the 8 offices we contacted raised concern that the formula, which hasn't been revised since 2003, may not effectively assign staff where they are most needed. VA also lacks information about the regional offices' varied approaches to managing their caseloads. For example, some offices have veterans work with a single staff person throughout the rehab process, and others may have veterans work with multiple staff who specialize in specific phases or types of cases. Unfortunately, VA has not assessed the relative advantages or disadvantages of these varied approaches, which is concerning given our finding that veterans who work with more staff over time are less likely to achieve suitable employment. And finally, we identified some gaps in SSA's training despite ongoing improvement initiatives. In particular, we found that VA does not provide sufficient training on helping veterans with job placement and workplace accommodations, which are key to a modern approach to ensuring veterans with disabilities secure and maintain employment. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'm happy to answer any questions that you or other members of the subcommittee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bertoni. Ms. Ainsley.
Thank you. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Vets First to share our views on the effectiveness of the Department of Veterans Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment, or VRE, program. Access to quality vocational rehabilitation services is critical to helping veterans with disabilities receive the skills and training necessary to help them reintegrate into the workforce. The opportunity to participate in the workforce is critical, not only because of the financial benefits from employment, but also because of the intrinsic value of work. Without the opportunity to continue participating in the workforce, many veterans with disabilities may become disconnected from the very society they pledge to preserve and protect. Data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that many veterans with VA disability ratings of 60% or higher are not participating in the workforce. Vets First is concerned about veterans with disabilities who, like other people with disabilities, face barriers to employment that include misinformation about disability and misperceptions about required accommodations. Even if they know about the Americans with Disabilities Act or the ADA, many disabled veterans are unsure about disclosing a disability to an employer and fear job-related discrimination due to a disability. VA's VRE services are critical to helping service members and veterans with service-connected disabilities who need assistance in developing and achieving a new path to employment. According to the Veterans Benefits Administration's fiscal year 2012 annual report, 121,236 veterans received VRE services during fiscal year 2012. Approximately 79% of these veterans served during the Gulf War era. VRE considered 9,949 veterans in FY 2012 to have successfully completed their rehabilitation program. The GAO's recent report on VA's VRE program laid out many challenges that hinder veterans in completing their VRE services. As was said already, these challenges include the veteran's disability, the need for a realistic employment plan, family obligations, and issues related to military transition. The presence of an employment barrier due to a disability is one critical factor that makes veterans that are seeking VRE services unique from other veterans returning to the workforce. Vets First is concerned about VRE's success in helping veterans with disabilities make a successful return to the workforce. According to GAO, those with veterans, especially with mental health issues, are facing challenges as they go through the rehab process. These challenges were illustrated by the GAO's finding that veterans with mental health conditions experienced a decreased likelihood of obtaining a successful outcome within 8 years of entering VRE than those with other disabilities. To address the needs of these and other veterans, we are pleased that VRE is adding courses on mental health awareness and techniques to their training regimen for all vocational rehabilitation counselors. VA must also ensure, however, that employees are properly trained on other issues that hinder the return to work of veterans with particularly significant disabilities. We believe that these disabled veterans need more information about how to approach the workplace as a person living with a disability, including understand workplace accommodations. To help veterans address some of their fears about approaching the workplace as a person with a disability, a research study conducted by the Northeast ADA Center in conjunction with the Army's Wounded Warrior Program concluded in part that information about the ADA, including disclosure decisions and accommodation practices, should be included in a veteran's vocational rehabilitation. In its report, GAO noted that the need for additional training on accommodations for vocational rehabilitation counselors, and we urge VA to develop and implement as soon as possible training on workplace accommodations. We also encourage VA to partner with the Job Accommodation Network, which is a service of the Department of Labor, to facilitate training on these issues and to connect veterans for future accommodation needs that they may have. Once placed in employment, some veterans need more supports to ensure their long-term success. VRE considers a veteran to be rehabilitated if he or she maintains employment for at least 60 days. Although some veterans' cases may be followed for longer than 60 days, we believe that more must be done to ensure the long-term success of veterans with disabilities in the workforce, not only in placement, but in retention and in promotion. Thus, we believe VRE should consider developing more partnerships with nonprofit organizations that provide the intense long-term services needed to assist veterans living with significant disabilities, including mental health conditions, in returning to and remaining in the workforce. Lastly, we support efforts to ensure that VRE receives increased supports, which include additional staffing resources and access to information technology to help them better meet the needs of veterans. For example, recent staffing increases have helped to decrease the VRE counselor caseloads, but more must be done. Additional gains will only come from more investment in VRE and its services. Again, thank you for the opportunity to share our views this morning. This concludes my testimony, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ainsley. And Mr. Varela.
Good morning, Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting DAV to testify at today's hearing to examine ways to maximize the effectiveness of the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment VOC Rehab program. We appreciate the subcommittee's continued interest in oversight, essential towards maintaining and enhancing this vital program. The committee's work ensures that our nation continues to fulfill its promises to the men and women who served. It is indeed a pleasure to offer our organization's insights into the Vocational Rehabilitation Program. For over 10 years, I had the distinct honor to serve as a DAV National Service Officer in New York and Los Angeles and witnessed firsthand the transformative effect of this program. My oral remarks will summarize 4 key points from my written testimony. First, DAV feels, and the recent GAO report confirms, the current VOC Rehab counselor-to-client ratio is too high and disproportionate throughout VRE. As we have recommended, VRE should maintain a VOC Rehab counselor-to-client ratio of no more than 1 to 125. We were concerned to learn that 8 offices averaged a ratio of 1 to 175, and in the Cleveland Regional Office, they averaged 1 to 206. VOC Rehab counselors have a very hands-on approach with their participants and require the time and ability to address the unique needs and concerns of program participants more effectively. The GAO report also confirmed what we had known before the findings of the report were published, that demand for VRE services is increasing and has done so steadily since 2008. There were 95,000 program participants in 2008, and as of March 2013, roughly 130,000. Other factors must also be considered when increasing VOC Rehab counselor staffing levels to meet the 1 to 125 ratio, to include increasing their administrative and support staffs to keep pace with increased VRE participation. This includes purchases, beneficiary payments, and infrastructure. Therefore, VA must request and Congress must approve sufficient resources to meet all the needs of the VRE program. Second, VOC Rehab is truly one of the more transformative benefits available to wounded, injured, and ill veterans and enables them to overcome their service-connected disabilities. The program provides essential tools and resources needed to give them a sense of fulfillment as contributory members to their families and communities. With such a powerful benefit, why limit the time frame in which a veteran can choose to use this benefit? In most cases, VRE benefits expire 12 years from the date of eligibility. This is what's commonly known as the use it or lose it period. We urge Congress to enact legislation that eliminates the 12-year limit to use this benefit. Third, much of the VRE process is still paper-based, unlike compensation and pension. Veterans still lack the ability to file their VOC Rehab applications online, as a paper application is still required. As VBA moves forward with their electronic processing, this will lead to confusion as to which method is required to make certain applications for benefits. Better IT systems also have the potential to increase overall efficiency, provide better accountability to the entire VOC Rehab program, could facilitate enhanced tracking capabilities of all services and procurements, provide ready access to data, and include features that would allow for better VOC Rehab counselor performance tracking. At present, much of the information required to get a full accountability of the program has to be done by examining local VRE folders and assembling data. It is vitally important that VBA request and Congress approve the resources needed to make these much-needed IT enhancements to improve access, oversight, and accountability throughout the entirety of the VRE program. Fourth, an often overlooked portion of the VOC Rehab program, independent living, also requires proper resourcing. We reiterate our recommendations regarding this benefit as highlighted in our hearing in November 2013. We urge Congress to support legislation to remove the cap and eliminate the current restriction placed upon program participation. Mr. Chairman, vocational rehabilitation embodies DAV's central purpose of empowering veterans to lead high-quality lives with respect and dignity. If we do not strengthen VRE, it runs the risk of compromising that purpose. How can a wounded, injured, or ill veteran achieve such a fulfilling life when it takes months to even begin the program and is then adversely affected by staffing and resource limitations essential towards effective participation? In closing, Mr. Chairman, despite some of the management and oversight challenges discussed in our testimony and the GAO report, we continue to believe that voc rehab is a vital and transformative benefit, essential and empowering, that has and should continue to make a tremendous difference in the lives of thousands of veterans every year. DAV stands ready to work with the subcommittee and VA to offer our expertise, insight, and experience to enhance the program. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony and stand ready to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Varela, and I thank the panel for their testimony. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Bertoni, in your report, you mentioned that each regional office differs in how they monitor and how they distribute the caseloads to VRE counselors. What are your suggestions as to how the VA can improve management to ensure that there is consistency and appropriate workload management at all the VRE locations, which would help ensure better service to veterans?
A couple things, but it's no surprise that the field offices have a lot of discretion to configure their staff and manage their caseload. That cuts across many different lines of work in the regional offices. But in this case, we did see a lot of variation in terms of how they were organizing these modules to process cases. We had specialization versus generalization. There's clearly, indications that there were advantages and disadvantages of each. But it was concerning to us that in our analysis we found that those who work with multiple counselors tend to have a lower success rate. If you had 4 counselors, you were 27% less likely to be successful in your rehab. So it just begs additional analysis. We've recommended that VA study some of these workload models, identify the advantages and disadvantages, and come up with some specific guidelines or best practices that they can share with the region so they can apply those to their own operations to have to be more effective. The resource allocation model needs to be looked at. We've got staffing based on performance that can disadvantage lower performing offices. We've got workloads that are fairly substantial in some offices that aren't excluded, that aren't giving proper credit. And that leads to FTE ceilings. And if you don't have the proper FTE ceilings, regardless of the workload mix, you're going to have deterioration in service. So those 2 areas, looking at how they're configured and factor that into your staffing allocation model to ensure that the appropriate staff are on the ground is important. And we've got 2 recommendations that should get them there.
Okay. I want to dig into the weeds a little bit on this. Mr. Varela, I'd like to follow up with you because you had a recommendation as to caseload management. I think you said 1 to 125 was your or DAV's recommendation. So, Mr. Bertoni, it seems to me like there's a difference in the degree of resources required for a rehab case versus an education case. Could you tell me, should there be different metrics for those 2 in terms of VA staff to caseload?
VA is the expert here in terms of the work credit measurement system, and I would say you're correct. If you looked at the work credit measurement system, different workloads receive different credit. I don't know if what they're getting for a voc rehab rehabilitation, developing a rehab plan is sufficient or not. I think it's something that the agency needs to look at to ensure that they're giving equitable or just credit for various workloads.
Mr. Varela, do you have any comments on it? Any thoughts about that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the workload credit, obviously there's an incentive to get a veteran to the completion of the program.
Sure.
And that is where they're going to give most of the credit. So there may be a precedence now that is not allowing VRE to get the credit that they deserve for everything that they do. There's a lot of client contact that takes place. There's a lot of needs that have to be addressed. Circumstances are continually training. There may have to be some coordination between VHA services and other outside entities. So all of that needs to be built in to determine how effective the program is. And if somebody doesn't complete the program, that really, that may not be the fault of the voc rehab counselor themselves. And they would get dinged for that. That would be a smudge on their record. But that doesn't mean that they didn't work with that veteran for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, and that credit should be recognized.
I'm going to try to get in one more question in my remaining few seconds. This is for all of the panel. Ms. Ainsley, let's start with you. Can you tell us what your thoughts are for the C Winners program? Try to keep it in about 20 seconds and tell me what you think the improvements should be. The IT system that they have.
Thank you. We agree that we need better improvements that will help to track the metrics as people are moving through the system, to know where people are at as they are tracking through, and to be able to highlight some of these points, as was mentioned by DAV, regarding as people step through the process, where are they at, and are there ways to provide credit and to identify problems. So if people are noting that they're at a particular level, you're seeing a high level of problem, what can we do to go back and fix that?
Mr. Varela, regarding C Winners, what are your thoughts about the system?
I know there's recommendations to enhance C Winners, but VA going forward, their major emphasis is VBMS.
Right.
Will C Winners be able to communicate with VBMS, or will it continue to be a standalone platform? They obviously need to make those IT enhancements. Can C Winners be enhanced to the point where it gives us all the data that we're looking for? I don't have the answer to that question. That's really going to require some examination.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I'm sorry I went over my time, but I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Well, birthday gift. I understand Tuesday was your birthday, and happy birthday, belatedly.
It ended with a 0 is a big one. So.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah, it hurt.
I've already done that. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for recognizing me. My first question goes to Mr. Varela and Ms. Ainsley. How should the VA measure success or failure of the VRNE program? Do we have the right measures and the measures that would incentivize the right sort of actions?
I do think that we need to make sure that we are not just looking at a particular time and point, which was mentioned about you're now rehabilitated. I think that it's a process that veterans are going to go through. So looking at the process as they're going through the stages to look for metrics there, but then also once you are considered rehabilitated, you've remained in employment. I would like to see some follow-up about what happens in out years. Does the veteran, are they able to remain in the workforce? Are there things that develop as they move through their work career? It's really more about the ultimate outcome and metric for me is a veteran remaining an active, productive member of the workforce. And then how you measure that really requires more of a longitudinal process.
Great, thank you.
Any metrics implemented going forward has to have the input of the participant. The veteran has to have the opportunity to say whether this is working and whether it's not working. And in our written testimony, we alluded to the new GI Bill complaint procedures that they have in place if you're having issues with a school or so on. You can go online and you can log these complaints. Veterans need to be part of that process, and there was a 2004 task force that reviewed the VRNE program, and that was one of the recommendations from that time, was you need that individual's input to determine if you're on the right course, what changes need to be made, and if that veteran feels that they're getting the services that they actually sought.
Ms. Ainsley, I want to return back to your suggestion that we look at the process. Can you suggest, give me some idea of what additional measures you would do to, so we don't just look at a simple outcome?
Well, we certainly do need to, when we're checking the process, connect with that veteran and see if they got the what they needed to actually return to the workforce. And so being able, I think, to do surveys and outcomes of the veteran, what he or she was looking for in the process. Did they remain employed? If so, were the VRE services helpful to them? I think are some key measures that we need to be connected with. It's always difficult to look at, metrics that come out from a program as you're going through the steps, and then how does that really implement in someone's life as they're now taking that process and moving forward. I would also suggest that there may be other programs that could be looked at within VRE and vocational rehabilitation, other systems that exist that might provide some guidance on standards.
Great, thank you. Mr. Varela, can you explain in more detail why it is so important to lift or at least extend the eligibility period for VRE?
Yes, Congressman. A veteran's situation is likely going to change over time. What was true today may not be true 12 years from now. And a veteran's service-connected disability is going to play a big part in that. The conditions may change, get worse. There may be new disabilities that are identified. And so this veteran that had the time frame may not have had the time to use it during that 12-year period. They may not have needed it during that 12-year period. Now fast forward 13, 14 years when their circumstances have changed and they come to vocational rehabilitation and employment and say, I'd like to utilize this program. If they hadn't met that 12-year requirement, they could be denied. Now there are ways around that, but that requires additional administrative review. They have to determine if a serious employment handicap exists. It should be open-ended. And when the need arises, they should be able to use it.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I stopped right on the clock.
Okay, you're very good. Thank you. By the way, I want to comment on the extension of the time period. As you know, your bill was incorporated with H.R. 357, which passed a couple of weeks ago, which extended the time period from 12 years to 17 years. So the ranking member has been a champion of this, and we've had some progress in the House, and hopefully our friends on the north side of the campus will take that up soon. Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. I had a question, I think, directed to Mr. Varela and perhaps Ms. Ansley as well. I want to thank all of you first for your continued work and service on behalf of our nation's veterans. In the testimony that the Paralyzed Veterans America, in their written testimony, they expressed some concern about the independent living program, and it certainly has come up in my district in California in Ventura County. They state in their testimony that although the program has proven to benefit disabled veterans during their rehabilitation, existing legislation continues to limit or cap the yearly enrollment. More than a decade of combat has produced many veterans that could benefit from assistance from the independent living option. Congress should remove the cap of $2,700 per year for independent living enrollment and vocational rehabilitation. Counselors should be trained and encouraged to recommend the IL program when it could benefit a veteran's rehabilitation. So that's what they stated in their testimony. Certainly in my district, we have veterans that are calling our office pretty routinely who've been unable to attain services within the independent living program because of the cap, and even probably more importantly, and the 12-year statutory limit on veterans for attaining V-R&E benefits. So I was just wondering if either one of you could comment on where you stand on that, and do you believe the 12-year limit is a problem? Do you believe the cap on enrollees for independent living, the independent living program is a challenge?
We would certainly align ourselves with our friends from PVA in their comments on the independent living program. It's a program designed to assist those veterans that are in the most need of benefits, and it seems to us as though if someone is meeting that need, why would we limit it based on an arbitrary cap. That, these are the veterans that are most in need of service, and if you meet that need, that service should be there. So we would support the independent living program being available as needed to veterans, and also the 12-year delimiting period. We would say, again, if the services are needed, a veteran's circumstances may change. We wouldn't want to limit access to something that's going to help someone rehabilitate, return to the workforce, and be a productive member of their community.
Congresswoman, there's two parts to that, so I'll take the 12-year period first. Obviously, we would like to see the cap removed, and I think this also would free up some VR&E resources as well for those veterans that come in after the 12-year period and then have to prove to a voc rehab counselor that they have a serious employment handicap. That's one less administrative procedure that they would have to undertake. And again, the 12-year period, these disabilities aren't going to last for just 12 years. These are disabilities that are going to be ongoing for the rest of their lives. So why limit access to that benefit for 12 years? Their disabilities don't have a 12-year shelf life, nor should the benefit. The independent living program, again, there shouldn't be an arbitrary cap. It should be open to all veterans that need it. It is one of the more intricate tracks in the voc rehab program. I mentioned in my oral remarks that VR&E services require a hands-on approach with their participants. It's even more so with those in the independent living program, so that would be more time-consuming as well. So you may want to look at whether VR&E stations require independent living specialists if we remove that cap and more people enter the program. But I would also like to commend this committee and the VA here recently for your oversight, and the VA VR&E program, because they've just instituted, I think it's a 14-hour training program on independent living services. So their VR&E counselors will have, looks like an in-depth training on the independent living program.
Thank you. My time is about to run out, but I'm wondering if either one of you have any data at all with regards to this in terms of veterans who need this program and aren't able to have access to it. Just yes or no, and if you do, I can follow up with you later.
No, we don't have that data on hand at present.
No, we do not have that data.
Thank you, and I'll yield back.
We just issued a report a couple months back on sort of the numbers around the program, so we can get you that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. I want to thank the first panel for their testimony, and I appreciate your efforts on behalf of our nation's veterans. You're now excused. I now invite our second and final panel for the day to come to the witness table. On our second panel, we have Mr. Jack Kammerer, who is the new director of Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Service at VA. Before he came to the VA, Mr. Kammerer had a long and distinguished career in the U.S. Army, and I was pleased to learn yesterday that he served with my friend from Texas, Mr. Guerin. Thank you for your service to our country, Mr. Kammerer, and you're welcome to the subcommittee. You're now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony. And I realized I called you up here in a hurry, so take your time to get ready.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Takano, subcommittee members, I appreciate the opportunity today to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program. In my brief tenure as VRE Director, I've already seen how the VRE team is engaged in multiple initiatives which will result in better support for veterans. Through Vet Success on Campus, we have collaborated with 94 schools across the country to provide additional education and vocational counseling and other services to over 80,000 veteran students. We also collaborate with the Department of Defense to provide assistance to service members through the Integrated Disability Evaluation System, and we have expanded counseling and other services for over 28,000 transitioning service members. We continue to work with federal, state, and local government agencies and private sector employers to increase veteran employment opportunities. VRE Service is currently developing new performance metrics to more effectively evaluate the full scope of VRE work activities at the local, regional, and national levels. VRE is also partnering with the Veterans Health Administration to develop video telecounseling. The VRE program assists service members and veterans with service-connected disabilities to prepare for, find, and keep suitable employment. For veterans with service-connected disabilities so severe they are unable to work, the Independent Living Program, or IL, offers services to improve their ability to live independently. The VRE program also provides education and career counseling to transitioning service members and veterans eligible for VA educational benefits and dependents of veterans who have permanent and total service-connected disabilities as authorized under Title 38, Chapter 36. VRE has nearly 1,000 professional vocational rehabilitation counselors and delivers service through a network of 420 office locations. Our service delivery model supports veterans where they are located with operations at 56 regional offices, 198 out-based offices, 71 installations, and 94 VSOC sites. In fiscal year 2013, VR successfully rehabilitated over 10,000 veterans with service-connected disabilities, with over 8,500 of those rehabilitated to suitable employment, and the balance veterans whose rehabilitation gave them greater independence through IL services. VRA had a 14% increase in applicants in FY 2013. We are completing data validation for FY 13, and we believe we have supported over 130,000 veterans with Chapter 31 services. The corporate winners system is the VRE case management application. C-Winners records the application and adjudication of VRE claims, rehabilitation planning services, and disposition of cases. Current C-Winners enhancements focus on developing subsistence allowance module to eliminate VRE's reliance on the legacy BDN system and move to payment through the corporate financial accounting system. The new FAST corporate module is being beta tested in 8 regional offices. We are finalizing development for national deployment. VRE has also built requirements for a new case management system that will expand on the functionality of the VBMS system. GAO made 6 recommendations in its January 2014 report on VRE. First recommendation suggested revisions of national and regional performance measures for the VRE program. We're currently engaged in redesigning local, regional, and national performance measures to include a range of broader spectrum performance data to more effectively evaluate program success. The second recommendation for GAO was to develop new measures of long-term employment to go beyond the minimum 60 days of post-placement monitoring. VRE provides comprehensive counseling, training, and rehabilitative services to remove employment barriers that challenge veterans in obtaining and maintaining suitable employment. VRE works with participants over a multi-year period with training and education up to 18 months of employment services. VRE counselors use judgment in determining where veterans have adequately adjusted to their employment and in certain circumstances will follow veterans beyond the 60 days. VRE is exploring different ways to follow up with employed veterans after their formal departure from VRE. A post-outcome case management tool is now in development. GA's third recommendation was to conduct non-response analysis of the results of VA ongoing Voice of the Veteran surveys. While VA's current Voice of the Veteran program does not include non-response bias analysis, the survey findings are statistically valid. Contingent on resource availability, VBA will modify the survey contract to include non-response analysis of the results. GAO's fourth recommendation focused on VA's allocation of VRE staff among the regional offices. VRE Service works closely with VBA's Office of Field Operations in determining resource allocations. VRE Service is designing a staffing model to account for regional factors, and with the Office of Field Operations will revisit the metrics used in the resource allocation model. The fifth recommendation from GAO is to collect information on the regional offices, approaches for managing their VR workloads, assess the advantages and disadvantages, and use the results of this assessment to provide guidance to the offices on best practices. VRE Service allows managers to decide how best to manage their workloads, but agrees that there is merit in analyzing data and communicating best practice. The final recommendation was to provide additional training. The VRE Service has provided multiple training activities and curriculums on job placement accommodations, and we will continue to develop and deploy additional products. Mr. Chairman, VRE Service will continue to assess and improve vocational rehabilitation services to service members and veterans who have incurred a service-connected disability, and we will continue to focus on enhancing both our service delivery and the actual services we provide. This concludes my statement, and I would be pleased to answer the questions from the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Kammerer. I appreciate your testimony, and I guess you've been drinking from a fire hose the last few weeks as you get your arms around this. I know that you agree with me, and I think you indicated this in your testimony, that there's a need to improve the C-Winners program or to create some other IT tool to better track the cost of participants. You mentioned in your testimony that the VRE has built a set of requirements for a new case management system that will expand the functionality of the Veterans Benefits Management System, or the VBMS, as more commonly called, to better support the VRE program. Based on what you've learned so far, when do you expect these requirements will be funded? And once they are funded, how long will it take for the final product to be delivered and implemented?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned in my written statement and my oral statement, currently we have completed the development of business requirements for the next generation of a case management system, At the same time, Mr. Chairman, we are improving the functionality of our current CWinner system to include a focus on the back end, the business side of it, and as I mentioned, we're piloting the subsistence allowance module. The budget works in cycles, as you know, previous to the release of the President's budget and the upcoming Oversight Committee hearings. I couldn't give you any specifics on funding specifically, but I look forward to keeping the committee informed on the progress of our new system. We are currently validating the requirements that we developed for the new system with our other business lines within VBA and VA, and we will certainly keep you informed of progress.
Okay, that would be good. The President's budget will be delivered on Monday the 4th, I believe, so hoping you'll follow up with us and let us know what the ranking is of the CWinners program and the VR&E IT resources following the release of that budget. So,
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay. The GAO report and the VSOs that were testifying here today have shown that they are concerned about the tracking, the 60-day tracking system that the VA currently has in place to track success following rehabilitation. According to the GAO's report, the VA commented that it found little to be gained from directing limited resources to implementing and executing additional post-placement measures. You know, the ultimate goal, you and I both share this, that the ultimate goal of VR&E is the long-term employment and rehabilitation of our veterans. And so I was going to ask you, why does the VA find it important to not extend that 60-day mark to truly support these veterans over the longer term? We did also do a check a bit ago to make sure the statutes, that these limits weren't built in the statutes or not. So the VA has the flexibility to change this if it elected to do so.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I understand your question. It's an important question. As GAO mentioned in their report on our programs, Mr. Chairman, we're seeing veterans in our programs for an extended period of time. As you know, veterans have the 48-month training period for training and education, as we in many cases train and educate them for future employment, and then we have the 18 months of employment services. And as you mentioned, sir, the 60-day period is to stabilize a particular veteran in employment, and then once that stabilization is complete, then we would, in a dialogue with the veteran, say that employment rehabilitation is complete. The challenge, Mr. Chairman, with that 6-year or extended period of time is I think we're sensitive to further extending the period of time, the formal relationship between the counselor and the veteran. As I mentioned in my oral and written statement, we're looking at a post-outcome case management tool to try to be able to measure beyond that 60-day period. And I look forward to looking at other ways to measure that, as well as, you know, Mr. Chairman, the congressionally directed long-term study is measuring 3 cohorts over a 20-year period. So we look forward to benefiting from that as well.
Okay. Well, again, I realize you're doing the job, but I would, if I were in your shoes, I'd consider trying to extend that a little bit. And it could be something as simple as 120 days out, 180 days out, a phone call to the veteran, say, how are you doing? You still employed? Things like that. So, again, we're not talking about a giant resource sink here. I don't believe. One last question: have the VA's VOC rehab counselors participated in the VA all-employee survey? And if so, what were the results of the survey?
I do not know the answer to that question, Mr. Chairman. I would have to take that to the record, for the record, and get back to you.
Okay, that'll be great. I'll now recognize the ranking member for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Kammerer, for your service to our country. Mr. Kammerer, can you tell me, are VR&E counselors trained on how to assist both veterans with physical wounds and those with mental health issues? Or does the training treat these type of disabilities as the same? So,
if I understood your question, Mr. Takano, it's our counselors, are they trained on both physical and mental health aspects of the veterans rehabilitation?
Right. Are they have the capacity to do both?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. Thank you for that question. As you know, Mr. Takano, Mr. Ranking Member, our vocational rehabilitation counselors have master's degrees in counseling, and they have extensive training and in many cases experience. I just visited a regional office. In fact, I met one of the counselors who had worked at the state level, had worked with a couple of our nonprofit partners, and was now working with the VA. But to specifically answer your question, they are trained and able to assist veterans both with physical needs. On the mental health side, we certainly, in most cases, defer to the mental health and the clinical experts. So in many cases, our counselors would make the appropriate referrals to assist those veterans with formal mental health services on the clinical side with VHA or another agency, the Veterans Health Administration. We have recently developed some mental health training that we're working on for our VRE workforce, sir, to better assist them with identifying and doing the proper referrals on mental health. So again, sir, we assist veterans with their rehabilitative needs, but in many cases, and that's true on the physical side too, I would say that we, in many cases, as you know, make referrals to the proper physical rehabilitation means, in many cases through VHA again.
But I think I heard from the GAO representative before that part of the retention problem is the inability to address some of these mental health issues of the veterans in the program. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a very critical aspect of a veteran's rehabilitation. I think the other thing I would say is, as I mentioned in my statements, my written and my oral statements, sort of that we also have Veteran Success on Campus counselors who are also vocational rehabilitation counselors. We've been partnering with VHA in their VITAL program, which provides mental health assistance to veterans on campus, in some cases based on their availability. So it is, as mentioned in the statements and in the GAO report, it's a critical aspect of the veterans rehabilitation. I just want to be careful that I say that we make the proper referrals, but we certainly deal with and recognize and support the mental health aspects of a veterans rehabilitation.
Thank you. Is the VRE program prepared for the influx of veterans that will result from the anticipated drawdown of our troops? What does the program need to ensure it is prepared to assist these transitioning service members?
We, as I mentioned in my statements, we do provide support to transitioning service members. In some cases, as you know, they would become Chapter 31 clients, and if they're eligible and entitled, we would facilitate their assistance through the Chapter 31 services that we've spoken about. Also, we provide the Chapter 36 education and employment counseling, which is very important for many service members. So we're working on our outreach for the Chapter 36 counseling services to make sure that we reach the right veterans. And as I mentioned also, we have approximately 200 on military installations vocational rehabilitation counselors helping in IDAs and other tasks.
But I mean, do you have any projections as to if there's going to be any increase in the numbers of service members needing the VRE program because of the anticipated drawdown? And
that's a great question too, and I'm sorry if I didn't answer directly if I misunderstood your question. I think as the chairman mentioned in his opening statement, as we continue to see a reduction as the backlog goes down and we continue to see adjudicated claims, we would expect to see an increase in applications for VRE services under Chapter 31 to include in some cases from transitioning service members. My boss, Deputy Undersecretary Kurt Coy, has given me 3 specific tasks as the new VRE director. He's told me to understand the current and the future population to include transitioning service members. He's told me, as we heard in the GAO report, to make sure we get the right performance metrics. And sir, he's told me to make sure that we get the right service delivery and service delivery models. So as part of your question about transitioning service members, I'm working very hard right now to understand the future population as we have more adjudicated claims, make sure that we are prepared in the places we are and the places we need to be to support those transitioning service members and veterans.
All right. Thank you so much.
Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kammerer. I wanted to continue sort of my line of questioning on the independent living program, and I'm just wondering, because my veterans are having issues with it in my district, and I'm just wondering if you have any data on, how many veterans applied in 2013 for the program, and has the VA ever considered lifting the cap, and have you done any kind of cost analysis on, what it would cost if we did eliminate the cap?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your question. I would have to get back to you for the record on the exact number of veterans that were rehabilitated through independent living in 2013. I'd say it's approximately 2.5% of the total rehabilitations, which, as I mentioned in my statement, was over 10,000. But I will get you the exact number for the record. I'm not able to talk about pending legislation is outside the views process. I know Ms. Devlin, the former acting director of the VRE program, as mentioned earlier, did testify extensively in November about the IL program. So I have no specific comments beyond Ms. Devlin's testimony about the cap, because I know that was previously addressed. And if you need additional information, ma'am, I'd be happy to get back to you on the record on that as well.
Well, that would be great. I would like to follow up on that. And I mean, just as in your position with the VA, is it? Are you hearing about this
No,
particular program?
I'm certainly happy to comment on that, ma'am. I didn't mean to not more specifically answer your question. I just didn't want to provide specific numbers without having those.
Thank you, sir.
Right at my fingertips. I think that generally speaking, that we've been, as I understand, right below the cap for the last several years, and so we have not currently had an issue with the cap. I think we may have several years ago. We were close, and we did some outreach several years ago. So it certainly, as you mentioned, ma'am, and in my experience, in my brief experience in this position, it's a very critical aspect of what we do, because if, and particularly older veterans or veterans with very difficult challenges, physical and otherwise, well, it's a very small population. Most of those veterans, as you well know, to qualify for that program, have to have a serious employment handicap and not be able to seek and maintain employment. So what we want to do for them is to restore their activities of daily living. So anywhere providing them work to help them with modifications to their home and visiting their home and helping them with their rehabilitation, it's very, very critical, as I mentioned again, for a very small but important population of veterans. And hopefully some of them at some point would be able to return to employment opportunities. So I look forward to working with you in the subcommittee and GAO and others to make sure that we continue to strengthen that program.
Likewise, and I think for our vets in Ventura County in California, it is the 12-year statutory limitation that is the bigger issue because they are older vets, and they've because of the 12-year limitation, they've exceeded that and don't have access to the program for that. So that's another area that I'd like us to look into.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Kirkpatrick, you're recognized for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have a challenging job, and I appreciate the good work you're doing. I just want to talk a little bit about the jobs portion of that. I recently took a combined armed services veterans trip to some military bases overseas, and my role in that was really talking with active duty members who are going to transition out very soon, and how we can have sort of a seamless transfer when they do become veterans. And the single most frequent question I got was, how am I going to find a job? What kind of job am I going to have? And so I'm interested in you mentioned your Title 36 counseling, that you start with active duty. At what point do you start reaching out to those members who are going to transfer out?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. And as you mentioned, it's a very important discussion. It's a very important question. I think the first answer I would provide is through the revised transition assistance program. We do have content that describes our programs and services, And we are, as I mentioned in a response to Mr. Takano, we're working to be as aggressive as possible to reach out to transitioning service members to provide them information on Chapter 36. If I could answer your specific concern about jobs as well, the one thing that is critical with the VRE programs and services is, in many and most cases, and as I was discussing with Ms. Brownlee about the IL, in most of our veteran clients, we are interested in making sure that we achieve an employment outcome for them. If we help them participate in an educational or training program, at the end of the experience, we want to be able to help them gain and maintain the right employment for them based on their knowledge, their abilities, their military experiences. So that is absolutely critical. I would say I visited an RO recently, and we have an employment coordinator in the VRE program in our ROs, and I discussed with him.
Let me just interrupt because my time's running out. But are they present on the military bases, and do they make contact with the? Really,
Yes,
what I want to know is,
I'm sorry.
Is there contact a year out or 8 months out?
Yeah, and I should have more specifically addressed that. We do have the 200 IDES counselors that are physically on military installations, and they are vocational rehab counselors that have the master's degree in counseling. And we do provide that content that I mentioned in the transition program. So, and we also have other contract and other counselors that support transitioning service members that sign up for the Chapter 36 services. So we reach them when they're going through their transition. We make our content available through social media.
So that could be just within the last week of their being in active duty, right? I mean, I guess that's my concern.
Oh, I understand your question. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if the contact doesn't happen until they start the transition process, that only leaves a week or so, right?
I think the military services, ma'am, and the revised TAP program are working to reach service members earlier in their transition.
That would be my request based on my conversation with these.
And I wouldn't want to speak for the DoD side
right.
of it, but I know in the transition activities the VA supports that we are connecting with service members earlier, either through e-benefits or in the TAP program. And I think your concern is, are we reaching and providing information to service members as early as possible? And
right.
I will make sure that I continue to work towards that, working with DoD and making sure that we do.
I think that's really important. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. And Mr. Kemmer, I appreciate your testimony today. And again, I appreciate your service to our country and to our veterans. You're now excused. I thank everyone for their attendance today and this frank discussion on how to improve this important program for our nation's veterans. Finally, I ask that all members have unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include any extraneous material in the record of today's hearing. Hearing no objections, so ordered. If there's nothing further, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.